Hello and welcome to Political Chinwag. Joining us today is the impeccably dressed Peter Barnes. He is a political campaigns director, conservative activist, and commentator. Hello, Peter. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me. Pleasure to be here.
You've reached the pinnacle of your career now by joining us on Political Chinwag, I'd like to add.
I think I have. I think there's only way, I can only go down. If I'm being honest. Yeah, trust me. It's really funny kind of how I got involved in all this kind of media work. Is I just fell into it. A friend of mine was a producer over at GB News. Somebody fell out of one of the kind of bookings that they had. She rang me at like 7:30 in the morning. I thought I better answer this. She's like, she would never usually ring me at that time. And then the next thing, I was like, okay, you come on the news. I was like, okay. And here I am, like over like a year later. I do lots of podcasts. I'm on a show called That Was the What That Was over on Talk TV. I've done lots of other kind of shows as well. And yeah, it's good fun doing these kind of things. It's also nice to kind of get out there and kind of talk to people as well. Like, I don't know about you guys, but like over kind of coronavirus and being locked down and everything, these kind of things I thought would kind of die a death, but I actually think they're really good fun now. Because no one's pressuring you with a quiz. I think that's where we're going. Well, no one's forcing you to do a quiz anymore.
The main two subjects we want to cover today are Rishi's and Keir's speeches. What are your thoughts on Rishi's speech?
So it was kind of something and nothing. I kind of get why he had to do it. One thing I found quite interesting about Rishi Sunak as being prime minister is you haven't seen him. He's not really been out and about. So I think I expect to see quite a few of these this year, where he's going to come out, he's going to kind of look like he's steering the ship. But the problem is you've got to say something, and I don't think Rishi really said anything. He had this 5-point bullet plan list that realistically was 3. If you can condense them down. But and I said the same thing with Keir Starmer. There's no detail. There's just bland political statements, these kind of boilerplate cliche lines that we always hear. And I actually think the public is crying out for somebody to come up with an actual plan that's written on, actual paper, not the back of a napkin. Too much of Rishi's speech, I thought, was kind of, I'm like you, I can relate to you, I'm just like one of the normal people. Politicians shouldn't do that. I've worked with politicians for a long time. I've yet to meet a normal one in all those years. Politicians are not normal people, because if you were a normal person, you would run away from the political world like faster than Usain Bolt could do 100 meters. Like it's not a normal place to work or to be involved in. So when they kind of do this kind of relating thing, I think it looks terrible. But in terms of the substance, again, there's just not much there. I remember watching, and I was watching it with some colleagues in my office, and we were like, "Is that it?" Like that tended to be the kind of somewhat of an anticlimax, because it was built, and there was the build-up around Westminster for a couple of days beforehand. This is Rishi's big launch. This is where he's going to take the reins. This is where he's going to really lead from the front. And I don't think he did that. I have nothing against Rishi personally. He wasn't my pick to be leader. I was a Penny Mordaunt fan. I'll put my stall out there. But
I think everyone knows I was a Penny Mordaunt fan.
Yeah. I think I remember writing on Twitter. I think me and you talked about it quite a lot actually. But yeah, like I liked him as Chancellor. I actually think he could be a good Prime Minister, but he's running it like a project manager. And I don't think he's really got the politics side of it, like doing the image bit. So that was Boris Johnson's greatest skill, was image, talking, being the character. And I don't think Rishi's quite there yet on how to do that. I think Boris went too far. Rishi's not gone far enough. And I think that's basically what we saw. I liked this maths thing about getting kids to go maths to the age of 18. I know this was really controversial according to Twitter, but I don't know about everything's controversial according to Twitter these days.
Well, that's true.
I think it's a really important thing. Like, I think you made a really good point that everybody's job has an element of statistics to it. It has an element of data handling, and it's and I think it's about training kids to be in the workforce. I think is something that we haven't done in education for a long time. I mean, I remember when I was at school, like, if you didn't go to university, you weren't paid attention to. Like, it was just to kind of go through the steps, just do what you have to do, get to university, get your degree, and then that's it. Kind of, you're on your own now. And I think this is one of the reasons why I think so many people have fallen behind, why standards have dropped. And it was nice to hear education actually be talked about, because I think the Conservatives over the last 12 years have been pretty terrible on education, realistically. I think if you look at it in terms of voter consciousness, as we call it, so like where it ranks in policy area, it's about eighth or ninth in terms of what voters actually like care about it. And I was like, it should be in the top five. Education is one of the most important things that we do. You know, educate about educating the next generation, but it's also how you get productivity back in the economy. It's how you fix most social issues. You know, education is the silver bullet, and I think the Conservatives have dropped the ball too many times on it.
I think the
But
issue
yeah.
is that we haven't had a Secretary of State or ministers long enough in position to actually change anything.
Oh God, yeah. So my aunt is a teacher, and let's just say she's a little bit more lefty than I am, and she always says, "Can you lot just leave education alone for 10 minutes? Like, pick a Secretary of State, keep them there, and they don't have to do anything. Just let us get on and do the job." And I think there's been a lot of tinkering around with it because Michael Gove and his reforms, when was that? Like 2015, 2016, something like that. And when he kind of changed how GCSEs are done and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, I think you're right. Like then we cycled through about three or four. I think we had Nicky Morgan was in there. God, we had loads at one point,
Didn't
didn't we?
Liz Truss change it from the normal gradings to the numbers? Was that
Yes, she
2010?
did. Yeah, and I remember again. I remember my auntie saying, "Well, that was a waste of time because all the extra paperwork." And it was like, well, they didn't really do anything because apparently A, B, C, D was too complicated. Apparently, and I was like, how is it? How can somebody explain to me how? Because like when we get like the big policy documents kind of come across our desk and we go through them and we kind of pull the policies apart. I remember looking at some of the education stuff, thinking, like the teachers are going to hate us even more than they already do. And I mean, teachers don't really like Tories as it is, but I mean, well, I think we were on a mission at one point to be the most hated government when it came to teachers.
I don't think we even
remember
have to
there was a
try,
great,
do we?
no, we don't. And that was I remember there's a great moment when Michael Gove was in front of one of the teachers' unions, and he was asked this question about working with teachers, and Michael Gove said, "Oh, I'll only work with you if you do as you're told." And I was like, "You don't say that in front of a trade union." I was like, "It's a big move," but I was like, "Oh well, that's it. You're getting run out of there with pitchforks and torches." Like, but yeah. Yeah, I have to admit, education is something that we really need to focus on more. And it was nice, like I said, to Rishi talk about it. But we need the detail. We need something.
No,
We need
definitely.
something actual, tangible to really grip our teeth into. And I actually think it's the way to jumpstart the country. I think there's this kind of sense right now, and whether you be on the left or on the right, everyone just a kind of meh. Like everything's just kind of ticking over. Everyone feels run down. Everything feels kind of like a foregone conclusion, and everything seems awful. And I'm like, we need to turn that around. And I think Boris might have actually been quite good now in that kind of happy warrior. But we'll just have to wait and see whether Rishi can pull it out the bag, I suppose.
I think one of the frustrating parts for me is there's no follow up on these plans. Like we had a 5 point plan about immigration, and there's been no real. I mean, I
Yeah.
know things take time, and I asked an MP this week, what's going on with that? And said, well, legislation needs to change. And I was like, well, but does it? Can we not get the administration side stuff moving? Can we not get the staff increases? That shouldn't affect funding, surely. But no one ever gives me an answer on that one.
Oh yeah. So, but like, it's quite funny when we talk about Keir Starmer's speech. This is the 10th rebrand basically that he's done. This is the 10th one, and like every time he's had 5 different top priorities over 10 times. I was like, well, what are your top 5 priorities? If every time you've done one of these, it's a different list of things, it doesn't make any sense to me. But you are right. There is the politicians do these speeches. They announce all this kind of boilerplate stuff, and then they just kind of kick everything into the long grass because things do take a long time. Things do you have to get the administrative and the structures around it to have big policy changes, but things do move painfully slow.
Yeah,
Painfully slow. I mean, I have to deal with civil servants pretty much every day, and I'm like, come on, have that extra cup of coffee, and I'm sure you can get the energy from somewhere to do something.
Jordan, you wanted to ask about social care, didn't you?
I did, yes, but going back to the education firstly, obviously with
Sure.
regards to maths, I think it's a great idea. Every part of day-to-day
Yeah.
life, whether it's budgeting for food, budgeting for just lifestyle, your wage, results in maths. So I think the backlash that he's had from that, I think it's just an aim to target him rather than realistically it's a bad idea. I think it's a great idea. Going on to the speeches as well, both speeches they played
Sure.
safe. The both of them played very
Oh,
safe.
yeah,
Keir Starmer's
yeah.
nothing special. He's actually been made to look good by how diabolical the Conservatives have been over the last 2 years.
That I do agree with 100%.
He hasn't really been up against a strong Conservative leader, frankly, to be honest. And I think
No,
if,
no, it's not.
if or when he becomes Prime Minister himself, if we have a good opposition leader, he's going to really, really struggle. Under Keir Starmer, I can't see Labour holding 2 terms.
No, so it's funny you actually talk about that. I was talking to a friend of mine who works for Ipsos Mori, one of the big polling companies, and they're basically making this argument saying that the Labour Party, realistically, if they do get into power, would probably last about 3 years before they'd have some kind of internal implosion, and we would probably go back to the polls again. I think you are right. It's unlikely that they would have 2 terms. Most are predicting that they won't even make it through 1 term. Because I have to admit, would you really want to take over right now, running the country with everything going on? Cost of living, Ukraine, you know, you've got industrial actions left, right, and centre. You know, like it's got to be one of the worst jobs in the world right now. I don't understand why anybody would really want it, but you are right on them playing it safe, and this is what I expect to be the theme of 2023. It will be that both political parties will try to frame most of the year and kind of say, well, this is what we're going to do, and this is why we think this is going to work. And then the general election is more than likely going to be either December or January, moving on later in the year. But it is annoying when they play it safe. For me, it's annoying because I want some bold leadership. I want some big policy plans. I want some big announcements. I want to hear something. I want to see the leader of this country actually lead, and we're not going to get that from either of them. I always say that Keir Starmer is just a nice haircut in a very expensive suit and not much in between. And I said that on GB News the other day, and I got in trouble for saying that. But a friend of
On
mine who
GB
works
News,
for
can you
Labour-
get in trouble in GB News?
No, it was a friend of mine who I was debating against, and she went, "That's not very nice of you to say, Peter." I was like, "Well, it's the nicest thing I can say." I mean, I could say a lot worse if you really want me to, but yeah, it is annoying. You are right, completely playing it safe. I think it's because, particularly the Labour Party, because this is their election to lose.
Oh, 100%.
This is theirs to lose. Like, they are terrified of messing all of this up, because this massive poll lead, all it takes is one scandal, 1 foot wrong, and it all comes crashing down. So yeah, I don't expect anything major from Labour. Realistic, they'll keep doing what they've been doing at the moment, where they just keep announcing things, and they really hope that no one's going to ask them any follow-up questions. That's one of my biggest annoyances, is nobody has asked West Streeting, what are you going to offer the nurses in terms of a pay rise? Why is not a single journalist asked West Streeting that question? And like any kind of Labour MP that's gone in front of a TV camera, it should be the first question you ask. And yet they just allow them to waffle on, bashing the Tories left, right, and centre. Which, don't get me wrong, they fully deserve on some of this stuff. But
I agree.
like, the oppositions have to be credible, and that's up to the media to hold an opposition to account. And we don't do that anymore. I don't think we have done for a really long time, actually. But yeah.
No, I agree completely. And as you said, the lack of investigative journalism in regards to looking into Labour's plans as being dire. Labour hasn't really given a proper plan, or at least a plan that they will do going forward. And they're just hoping the Conservatives keep digging their own grave. And at the moment, I feel that we need to play it safe, because we can't damage our own reputation anymore, or else it will be swamped by Labour seats come the next election. And I think when I speak from up here, so I'm in the northeast of England, I'm in Durham, and we've seen, really, the Conservatives have done really well in Teesside. So
yes, it's Ben.
Yes, he's the mayor.
He's the Teesside mayor. Yeah, he's the mayor.
He's been doing fantastic, and the recently won a by-election just before Christmas, and they are going from strength to strength. And I can actually see us retaking Teesside in the next election, because Teesside's been let down by Labour for so many years. But when it comes to, like, so for instance, the constituency I live in, Sedgefield, which is currently Paul Howell's seat, I think he's going to struggle to retain that, not because he's Conservative. I mean, not because Labour's good, sorry, but because he's actually Conservative.
Yeah, I think a lot of those kind of MPs are going to be kind of fighting an uphill battle, because the brand of the Conservative Party is what's been tarnished. The credibility of being good on the economy after what I call the Liz Truss blip, that really was one of the final nails in the coffin. But I think Partygate played a big factor in kind of trust in the Conservative Party, competency. I think you're right. Like the Conservatives will make big inroads in somewhere, but the actual politicians, and I always feel sorry for councillors on this front, that they'll get kind of swept up in kind of big national stories.
Yeah.
And they're just going to fight an uphill battle. And sadly, I think we'll lose a lot of really good kind of new intake MPs from 2019 who I actually think could be really good, but they're probably going to lose the seats in the next election because of everything that's happened. I'd literally just say everything now because of everything.
No, I agree. Like you say, Portugate's being a massive one. But what was your opinion on obviously Keir storming the Curry and basically getting away with it? Do you believe he broke the law there?
Oh, so I always found that really interesting. I remember when I got a notification through on my phone, and I went, "You have to be kidding me!" Because like just from a kind of outsider's perspective, I don't understand how he didn't break the rules.
Yeah.
Just as a kind of, if just looking at it, I think everybody thought he broke the rules there. Like even some of the most diehard Labour people I know said he probably did break the rules. The most interesting one out of all of that was how did people forget that Angela Rayner was in the room?
Exactly.
Because if you're in the originally she wasn't there.
Yeah, she declined
and
it, didn't
she? And then she was actually there. And I'm like, I've met Angela Rayner. She's a very loud person. She's very difficult to not notice when she's in the room. Like when she's there. So how did everybody just magically forget? That's something I've never really understood. But I don't think it was corruption. I just think it was an interpretation of the rules. I do think that the Durham police may have buckled a little bit to political pressures because of the implication that Keir Starmer would have had to resign. And I have to admit, I think the Tories were kind of praying that he was going to get caught. And it would be a way to get rid of Keir Starmer. But God, doesn't that seem like a lifetime ago now?
It does.
It really does.
And everything we've gone through, it seems, God, it seems like a decade ago.
Yes, it does. Well, it's probably about 6 prime ministers ago, the way it goes, the way we go on.
Oh, yeah.
But
I've got a friend of mine works for a big policy think tank in America, and he said he counts the months in which British Prime Minister it was. And I was like, okay, all right. It's unusual that this happens to us. Like, let everybody calm down. I'm not taking civility lessons on politics from an American.
Yeah, no, it's just... Zoe, did you want to jump in with your subject?
Yeah, so going back to Rish's speech, I was really pleased that he acknowledged and spoke about stopping violence against women and girls. It was obviously, it was only a small comment that he made, but even so, from a prime minister making it in his speech, I thought that was great. So he obviously said
100%.
about being frank, that it involves men taking responsibility for creating a culture and society where women are safe in their communities and at home. So not obviously there's an awareness about domestic abuse, and obviously this whole campaign of obviously stopping the violence against women and girls.
Yeah.
So I hope that just gets it out there a little bit more.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's a really, really important issue, and I always go back to the Sarah Everard case and the kind of all the protests and stuff that came from that. What really annoyed me was, for some reason, we ended up talking about your right to protest somehow as a kind of resulting debate over all of that. It never actually stuck with Sarah Everard. It never actually stuck with making sure that vulnerable people, men, women, whoever, and women, girls, all the rest of it, are protected, or are actually doing the right in terms of a crime, stopping crime. And it really annoyed me that we just didn't stick to the actual issue, and it just snowballed out of control. And I kind of think what could have been a real turning point kind of got swept away.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I have to admit it was. I wasn't really expecting to hear something like that in the in Rishi's speech. I think it came as a bit of a surprise to everybody. But I know the Conservatives have put a real effort into turning around rape cases. but there's a lot of money and a lot of focus went on to making sure there's a high level of prosecutions, and so I think it's kind of going to lead into that as a kind of where the law and order kind of party narrative. And it's going to be interesting to see what they're actually going to be able to do in terms of legislating over some of this stuff. But like it's a long parliamentary year. Well,
Yeah.
let's actually wait till Parliament sits before we start talking about any kind of big law changes. But no, I think it's a really important issue. It was nice to hear it get mentioned, but it's just, is there really going to be any kind of political backbone to it? Or is it just going to be like look at this shiny new policy thing that we did, rather than actually doing anything, which is sadly, as we move closer to a general election, that's what we're going to get.
Yeah. Well, I hope they stick with it, because it is
There is a
really
lot of
important.
pressure. There's a lot of MPs that are really hot on this issue,
Yeah.
and they won't let job. It's very unusual that it's actually cross-party support on this. It's there's no actual kind of tit for tat politics over it. There is actual general consensus that something needs to be done. So that's usually a good start.
Very true.
When no one's calling another person a fascist, it's always a good start. Something actually might
Always a
happen.
good sign. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. What a low bar we set. Oh, how depressing.
Jordan, did you want to jump back in with the social care stuff?
Yeah, so, excuse me. So, obviously, Rishi's explained that he was going to try and get people discharged from hospital and into the social care system. But the social care system's already that stretched. Us three working it here, we all work in social care, and we know how stretched we are, how big waiting lists are for the support services that we offer. Do you really think that's the correct move from the Prime Minister? Because is he not just trying to fix one problem by increasing another problem? It's just going to snag him later on.
Oh, 100%. 100%. Like, I've always said, any political party that fixes social care will be in power for 20 years. It is the single biggest issue this country faces, is social care. It's not, cost of living is an inflationary thing. That will eventually sort itself out. But the social care aspect and the issues of it within the NHS affect every aspect of society. It doesn't matter whether you're rich or poor, black, white, gay, straight, whatever. Everybody will be affected by social care. And I think this is the one thing that there needs to be cross-party support. There needs to be actual action. People need to stop playing politics with it and do something, because it is at breaking point. You guys probably know this 10 times better than I do, but it is a huge problem. And I don't have the answers to it. I hope somebody does.
We were hoping you were.
Oh, no. I comment on things. Don't come to me for an answer. But no, I've always said this with real seriousness. If any political party has a workable and practical plan to fix social care, you will win 3 or 4 general elections just off the back of that one policy. Because it is what I think it's the main thing that's crippling the NHS. We could talk about staff shortages, we could talk about all that, but social care is the real thing that's crippling it. And there has to be something to do. I do agree with you that somewhat at the minute it just seemed to be kind of kicking the can down the road, and we'll say we'll fix this, but then we're going to have to fix the next bit, but then we'll fix the next bit. And I don't think that's the right way to do it. I think there needs to be wholesale shifts, a wholesale policy renewal. I've not heard anything from any political party, whether it be Labour.
No one wants to touch it.
No, nobody wants to touch it. It's what we call the third rail. So you touch it and you die, because because if you get it wrong, you get it really wrong. And like I said, because it affects everybody, you're not just going to lose one voter, you're going to lose all voters. And I think that fear is a big part, particularly again as we move into a general election year. But I actually was not that against the increase in national insurance to pay for social care. I actually thought that was at least something.
I agree with you, yeah.
Something.
At least it covers the cost of something, doesn't it?
I actually thought if it was ring fenced and it was properly protected money to go specifically to social care, I actually think it was not a bad idea. And I think a lot of people were kind of like, yeah, I get it. I don't really like a tax rise, but if it's going to this specific thing, people don't generally mind that, in my opinion and experience of having to deal with people when it comes to taxes. But is a crippling problem, and somebody somewhere has to have an answer or at least we need to get some of the smartest people in the room and just say you're not coming out till you fix the problem. It might be one of the, like where you get two naughty kids and like you just put them in a room and like you just have to like you're not coming out to your friends again. I think that's what we have to do. So I know in America they call them blue ribbon commissions. And I was at a speech that Anne Widdecombe, of all people, was giving, and this was actually about NHS reform. And she was basically making this argument, saying we need to take the politics out of it, because if you really want to save the NHS, this is crunch time. This is crunch time now. And she was basically saying that we need to get people in a room, and you're not coming out till you come up with a policy that works.
I think the biggest issue is that social care always comes second to the NHS.
Yes.
And that the social care and care in the community relies heavily on the private sector. And following COVID, the private sector, there's no attraction to working in care anymore, because the risk to carers now is much higher than it was because of COVID. It's long hours, it's hard work, it's hard work.
It also seems to be quite a thankless job.
Oh, absolutely.
You don't really like. And people always clap for nurses and people like doctors, but carers don't really hear anything for them. Like people who work in social care and stuff like that. And it was like, but there needs to be some kind of appreciation, and there needs to be, I think, a kind of public education campaign on what social care actually is, what it entails, what these jobs actually are, because I think a lot of people don't really understand it. People will talk about social care and they'll talk about elderly people and all the rest of it, but they talk in broad platitudes. They don't really know the specifics. And I think if somebody or like a pressure group or some charity or something actually did a proper public education campaign to teach the public that why this is so important, I actually think you'd see politicians be forced to do something, because the public would be more aware of it and more educated over it.
I agree entirely with what you're saying. And I think, like, I personally, my experience in my role, it's very difficult to get care. And that's what I'm saying with the private sector not coping. There's no service like with the NHS. The nurses, they're all employed by the NHS. It's all already there. There's a structure. Someone goes in, they get the treatment, they get better, they go out. But during COVID, they just pumped everyone out into care homes, into homes, and then that took away all the care. People that didn't need residential care, and they could have survived with a small package of care at home, say like a carer twice a day just to help them with food and medicine, were going into residential care. And then people that needed residential care couldn't go into residential care, and then that created the backlog, just because they wanted to ship people out because of the beds. So, I mean, I was glad to see that they're going to get 7,000 more hospital beds in the NHS.
My question on that one is, where from?
Yeah.
Where are they getting them from?
It's all the beds from the Nightingale hospitals we never used.
God, yeah. Well, that was a catastrophic waste of money. But I always find it really funny when people always say, "Oh, we're always short on beds." I was like, "Well, buy more." Like it always seems funny to me. It's like you've got this massive budget. Somebody must make the beds. Pay them to make more beds. It just always seems to be a bed shortage, and I was like, well, get more beds. It is. I know. That's probably a very oversimplistic thing, but it is nice to hear that we're getting all this extra stuff. And I think, like I said, as social care becomes more of a kind of public issue, politicians will move on it. But I won't be holding my breath just yet.
No, things need to happen. I mean, I always offer my services to MPs when I meet them and say, I'm happy to be a special advisor.
I tell you right now, a very good friend of mine used to be a special advisor, and she always said it was the worst job she's ever had in professional politics, because you don't really know what your job is, because you're not a civil servant, you're not like you don't work in a kind of parliamentary office. You were kind of stuck in limbo, and she always said it was really difficult to try and get anything done because she didn't know where she fitted in the kind of hierarchies and structures of everything. So everyone always says be a special advisor must be quite a lot of fun. Most of the ones I know, they actually don't really enjoy it that much. But there's a little bit of Westminster insider knowledge for you.
If it's good money, I'm happy to suffer.
It's politics. It's not good money. I always find this really funny that everybody's like, oh, all these people like milking from the political system. I'm like, where's the money? Because if there is, I'm in the wrong job. Yeah. You know, I was always like, oh God, like there's so much money sloshing around in politics. I was like, is there? And where is it? but but yeah, no, it will, like I said, social care will be a huge issue. Um, I think going into the next general election, it'll be interesting to see where the Labour Party fall in it, where the Tories fall in it, and also where parties like the Greens and the Lib Dems fall as well.
Mm.
Because I think we're going to see a real variety of ways to fix this problem. Which, as a kind of political nerd, I'm rather looking forward to. But
Have they withdrawn the white paper, what they were doing with the reform for social care in regards to the funding and stuff?
oh, that's a very good question, and I don't know the answer to it, I'm afraid. Excuse
Because
me.
there was lots in that. I mean, it was good, but again, it came down to money. It said, "Oh, the social care is going to get so much money, but not for like the first 3 years."
Yeah, I think there was a big argument over which department has to pay, if I remember rightly. I think the Treasury was saying we're not ponying up any more money. It was up to the Department of Health to pay for it. And you know, this is the great thing between government departments is they just get a budget, and it's a lot of it is we don't want to pay for it because we need to protect our budgets for whatever else we want to do. So that's usually when things kind of get stuck in the weeds, as it were, because nobody wants to pony up the money for it. When it actually comes to writing checks, everybody likes to talk about investing. Always remember, investing means spending. But when actually writing a check and actually doing something, that takes a very long time.
Should we jump onto immigration? That's obviously a big subject.
Yeah.
And has been a big subject for a long time. What do you think about the Rwanda plan?
I think it's a good plan. I don't think it's this silver bullet. I don't think there is a silver bullet to immigration. One thing I think we need to get away from in politics in general is the idea that one policy is going to fix everything. But if it can reduce the numbers even just a little bit, I think it would be money well spent. But there has to be other things that we do. What I don't want to happen is we like the government just kind of rubs its hands together and says, "Oh, we've got the Rwanda plan now, immigration fixed."
Yeah,
I
job
think
done.
that a job done kind of that kind of mentality, and I think if the government's not careful, they can fall into that trap very easily. You know, it's still got a few hurdles to go through legally. I know it's just been to the High Court, but it will be challenged and all the rest of it. But I was very surprised that it wasn't even just rejected, like kind of initially by the courts. I was surprised that it was actually like kind of approved of by the High Court. But like I said, what are they called? The Good Law Project and all that lot. What was it? Priti Patel called them do-goody lawyers or something like
Yeah,
that.
something like that.
Something like that. Lefty lawyers and do-gooders or something like that. I think she called them. But yeah, it will be a contentious one. I think there is broad support for it in the country, but I think it will come down to the practicality of it and the kind of administration of it to see whether it's actually a success. But yeah,
I'm not a fan of it. I think it's just it's a plaster over an amputation. Really, it's not a very good option. Well, it is. It's a terrible option. It's trying to palm the responsibility onto someone else as well. It feels.
oh, that's been government policy.
Of course,
for
it
the
is.
last 500 years.
Yeah, of course, but
Successive governments have been doing that. If they don't have to deal with it, they won't deal with it.
that is a fair
But
point.
no,
But
I think you are right. I think it is somewhat of a plaster over an amputation. I think that's actually quite a good phrase. But what I would go back to say is, again, we have to do more. It can't just be the one policy. We've got to do more about it. I think what that entails, whether we pull out of the ECHR, I think that is very firmly on the table.
I think Peter Bone's withdrawn his private member's bill on that, hasn't he?
Yeah, but he kind of withdraws it and then he puts it back in again. He just he hokey cokies with it basically. He's in and out, in and out.
sounds a bit like Liz Truss.
Oh yeah. So, but Liz Truss, interestingly, Liz Truss was the only one out of the Tory candidates during the leadership to go to the ERG and say, "I will pull the United Kingdom out of the ECHR." She was the only one to do it, and that's why she basically got the support of the of the ERG. But Rishi's not ruled it out, which I find quite interesting because he's not really that type of conservative, in my opinion. He's a little bit more of a Cameronite kind of middle of the road kind of Tory. This is seen as quite a hard righty kind of proper old school Tory thing to do. and it's interesting that it's still on the table. Whether it's just a threat, I don't know, but it'd be interesting to see how that plays out, because I know for a fact there is real appetite amongst the parliamentary party to open this discussion and to see how workable it would be. I know there's some work already being done by little groups of MPs when they all kind of huddle together in the tea rooms. This is already being done and being talked about, but it will be interesting, because I even think that there is some appetite probably on the Labour benches of this for people who want to stand in red wall seats. People who want, like, they're taking back, say, places like Wigan, where I'm from, and, you know, St Helens and Bolton and places like that. People want to see action done on immigration. They want to see something to stop the boats. So will there be a bit of a tension there in the Labour Party over this? Because all the Islington elite lot, they want to stay right in it. But will the more northern contingent rebel? I think that'll be an interesting development, and I really wouldn't rule it out.
I completely agree, because I keep saying that the 2019 election wasn't won by Boris Johnson, it was won by Brexit and the immigration crisis, and the plan that the Conservatives had to do that. So I completely agree. I can see a lot of Labour MPs or potential MPs coming out and stating their agreement towards it to win them votes, to win those seats. I know Sedgefield voted for Brexit quite heavily, and that's a traditionally red wall seat. It's famously Tony Blair's seat, and it's interesting to see that dividing. I think that's why Keir Starmer as well has certainly brought Labour back more central. Definitely centralised Labour and got rid of a lot of the further left within the Labour Party, which of course has came with a lot of backlash within the own party. But I think that's going to benefit him a lot coming up to the next election, because I always find that politics is definitely one in the centre ground. It's one where more towards the centre than to the further left or further right of the parties.
So two things. So if we go to Starmer pulling the Labour Party in the centre, one thing that Starmer's been very good at is cleaning house after Corbyn.
Yeah.
He got rid of all the Corbynistas. The NEC is basically all what's known as Starmer's people. Most of the candidates who end up being put up are Starmer's people, is what they call them at Southside, which is the Labour HQ. And they took control of the reins very firmly. They cleaned house and they tidied themselves up. And that I will give the kind of the new Labour administration, and Keir Starmer did play quite a big role in cleaning the Labour Party up. I don't necessarily think that politics is one from the centre ground. I actually think what it is voters all want the same things. Our politics is more administrative than ideological now. Everybody wants good schools, solid NHS, jobs, growing economy and stuff. So our politics really now is, how are you going to deliver that? There's no real great ideological battle apart from Brexit, and now Brexit's probably not going to be a huge factor in the next general election. So it will be kind of really dull, what we call grey politics, where it's not really that interesting. It's a little technical. There's no kind of big fight, as it were. And I think this is when people say, oh, it's politics from the centre ground. I don't think it is. I think it's that voters all want the same thing, and it's all about how you're going to offer the voters what they want, and it's up to the voters to decide which way to go about things. But this is a huge debate, and I'm often told I'm wrong on it. But yeah,
You're more of an expert than me, Peter, in that regard. So I'm more centre right than I am anyone else probably is here, and I strongly believe that controlling the centre of politics gives you definitely the strongest foundations to go on to winning an election. But,
yeah, I think it also allows you to kind of capture the largest number of voters.
Agreed.
I think that's a really strong argument. But it's interesting to see maybe how what's known as the culture war stuff, how that will affect the centre ground in politics, because that stuff isn't going away. The trans issues, the kind of LGBT education lessons, drag culture, all the rest of it, that's not going away. Politicians hate it. Every mainstream politician I know hates this stuff because they say we're never going to win. But you're going to annoy somebody on either side of the debate. So most politicians think it's actually they call it toxic. But I think it's only because they get shouted at quite a lot and they don't like that. But it's quite ironic how thin-skinned most of them are. But I think that will be interesting to see how that stuff affects the centre ground. But Yeah, the trans one in particular, particularly for the Labour Party, is going to be a bit of a headache. Oh, it still is an ongoing headache for them. Oh, like a huge headache. I remember, well, not the last party conference, but I think it was the one before, where the whole "what is a woman" question, and it just dominated that conference. I like, if I was running the comms, I would be pulling my hair out, because this was a chance for Keir Starmer to kind of like, be a leader, show the party strange, and he was just dominated by "what is a woman." But none of them could agree on an answer. None of them, because this stuff is really contentious. There's a lot of very heated arguments on all sides of it. So, but like I said, politicians don't really want to wade into it, and unfortunately, when they do wade into it, I tend to find they jump in with 2 feet and make a complete mess of it.
Yeah.
On both sides of the political aisle on that. I think Michael Fabricant jumped in over the Scotland's gender recognition bill. Do you know that one that went through?
Did it go through in the end? Or
Yeah, it did. It did in the end. And he put out this tweet, and I have never seen so many people jump down somebody's throat so quickly in my entire life. I think like within like 2 minutes, he had like 500 replies back to it. It was a really badly worded tweet, but everybody just jumped on it, and I was like, oh god, that looked like it hurt.
Well, with the gender recognition reform thing, then do you foresee any problems with that? I mean, because we spoke about this a couple of weeks ago, and I've sort of raised concerns I'd seen on Twitter. People obviously talking about people going into prisons. They're going to identify as female before they go into prison, because it'd be easier, wouldn't it, as a man in a female prison?
Yeah. So I think that was one of the big controversies over the new bill, because didn't they vote to stop that if you were charged with a sexual crime, basically? You had to go through extra steps or something, and they voted to remove that from the bill. That got voted down. Yeah, so that was a big controversial one. And I think this is one of the things where the trans lobby, I don't really like using that phrase, but where they're not really winning their argument is they're running before they can walk, let alone crawl. And I think they're going at this stuff hell for leather, and they're just saying, oh, if you don't agree with me, then you're a bigot. That argument doesn't work on this stuff anymore. We've moved on from that. But I think there's little bits like that they could have put in the bill, I think, and there's other little bits where they could have just done it slowly and incrementally, and I think they could probably win, and I think they would have a lot of the country supporting them. But because they've gone from 0 to 100 at breakneck speed, I think they've put a lot of people off. They've kind of made a rod for their own back, for want of a better phrase, over a lot of it. But it would be interesting to see if Westminster tries to overrule it, which they have the power to do.
Yeah, Section 35, wasn't it?
Section 35, yeah. And I remember, I think Suella Braverman, I think she came out and said she was going to look into it. Dominic Raab, is he still Justice Secretary? I don't even know who's in the cabinet anymore.
Can't keep up anymore. It's been a rough 2 years.
Oh, I used to know all the names of all the MPs, what were the constituencies, and then I just stopped caring. I just stopped caring. But he said that they were going to look into it, and and Alistair Jack, who's the Scottish Secretary, he pretty much said, we are looking into this. So I think that's on a big collision course between Scotland and Westminster again, but. Yeah, it will be firework. Yeah. It's one of those, grab the popcorn and sit and watch. Twitter will be glorious.
It will.
It'll be a hellscape, but it'll be glorious to watch.
I think the thing with the trans issue, I think the biggest conflicting point I can see is feminists. They
just feminists. just all of them. Wow, and people say I say because some controversial things.
That's that. When I look at Twitter, the word, I didn't know what the word TERF was for a long time. I had to Google it.
Oh yeah. Oh god, the number of acronyms and the way the language moves so quickly. I mean, I sometimes feel like I'm about 85. Like the way that it moves so quick, and I'm just like you blink and suddenly you're not allowed to use this phrase, or this acronym now means something else or whatever. I'm like, just give us 5 minutes, will you, please? But go on. Sorry.
So I think part of the thing that goes against the is the speed of what the trans issues come along at.
Yeah.
It's been rapid, and I think people can't adapt to that change that quickly. I mean,
100%.
I mean, you think how long it took.
I've made this argument with a lot of the gay lobby, because gay rights basically, once gay marriage kind of passed, a lot of the big fight in the kind of LGB bit was basically done, and the trans community basically wanted to be on equal footing. Well, you can't really do that because the gay rights, civil rights movement has been going for 30 years, 30, 40 years, if not longer. You can't suddenly expect to be on the same footing in the public perception and public education on this stuff. And I think it goes back to what we were saying earlier over social care about educating people. They're not interested in actually having a debate on this stuff. They're just more interested in shouting at you.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but if anybody shouts at me, I just kind of tune them out. I'm not interested. I don't think you're making a rational point. I just kind of just switch off because I'm like, oh, you're just some angry little person shouting at me. I'm not. I mean, you know, you're not really making an argument to me. And I think if they were a little bit more if they did this stuff slower, and if they were a little bit more open and a little bit less ferocious than they are, I actually think they'd be a lot further on than they are now. I do think that they're not exactly the greatest advocates for their own cause. But you get that a lot in social justice movements. I always think that most environmentalists have done more harm to the green agenda than anything else. And I think the trans community has done more, the trans lobby's done more harm to the transgender cause than anybody else. You know, the far right isn't that organized to hate, but the trans lobby is, like I said, is very angry. They come across very ferocious. The way they went after J.K. Rowling, pretty much the minute she opens her mouth, actually, at some point. And I always find it really funny that they keep asking former Harry Potter actors what they think about this stuff. The guy who played, is it Dudley? He got asked about this because he's in a new film, and he was just like, please don't ask me that question. Like, it's literally to the journey. He was like, please don't ask me this. I'm an actor. I don't really want to get involved in it. But yeah, it's
Is that the Christian Bale movie?
I think it is.
The
Yeah,
Netflix one. I thought that was him. We're digressing somewhat, but yeah, it looks good.
Yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, because I do a show called That Was the Woke That Was. I have to kind of look through all these kind of woke stories and all the craziness. And like, I remember when I used to read real news.
Yeah.
And like things that actually mattered. And you know, now I'm reading about Harry and Meghan. Oh my God, if I have to talk about those two.
On that subject, do you want to?
No, here we go. I knew as soon as I said it. But no, just really quick. Like on that stuff, like some of it is crazy. The world has gone crazy. And
last 10 years, especially.
Yeah, probably. And I think in the last 5 years, everyone's just lost their minds. But and I think the Harry and Meghan stuff is a prime example of this. I was at GB News on Thursday this week, just doing a little segment, and one of the cleaner was in the green room, and she was like cleaning out the coffee machine, all the rest of it, and they had the rolling TV news there, and she was just stood watching the news report because it had just come out when Harry had said Will had beat him up or whatever, and she was just stood there laughing, shaking her head like. And she just looked at me and rolled her eyes, and like I could hear her eyes scrape her skull. She rolled her eyes that hard, and I was like, thank you for that, because it makes me feel like I'm not the only one losing my mind over it. It's got to that point where, do you know, like on Twitter now, you can actually block certain words.
Yeah.
Most people I know have Harry and Meghan Markle, they're blocked, so like they just don't see any of this stuff.
I was like, do that.
God. Yeah, apparently you could do it all. People were doing it over the football, for example. If you weren't interested in the World Cup, you could block certain, like Qatar, out of tweets or whatever. And I was like, I really wish I was allowed to do that. I really wish I didn't have to pay attention to it.
I was talking about Qatar. I was really surprised at how quickly the furore over the human rights violation stuff disappeared over that.
Okay, so I have a very controversial opinion over this, and I actually think the reason it all the reason it all went away was because of Joe Lycett. Joe Lycett's little stunt hindered and decimated that debate, because we didn't talk about human rights after that. What did we talk about? We talked about Joe Lycett. We didn't talk about gay rights. We didn't talk about abuses of migrant workers and all the rest of it. We talked about him shredding money and David Beckham. That everybody keeps thinking that stunt kind of pushed the debate forward. It didn't, because we were already talking quite seriously in public discourse about gay rights around the world, and economic migrants and the way that they're treated and the way women are treated in Qatar and stuff like that. And then that stunt came along and it just stopped it. It killed it dead.
Yeah.
And it has annoyed me no end to see people say, "Oh, Joe Lycett, he's done so much work on this." I was like, no, he's the villain in this story. He's not the hero.
It was
whether.
No, I was just going to say it was a hell of a PR move for himself.
Oh,
Absolutely.
It was brilliant. I'd love to know which person came up with it. As a publicity stunt, I think it was brilliant. But when you actually look at the consequence of the stunt, the minute that you end up talking about that and not the message, it's not a good
exactly.
move.
Yeah.
It's like the Just Stop Oil people when they glue themselves to the road or whatever. That's all anybody talks about. Nobody's talking about what they actually want to talk. Everybody's just talking about that. And it's the exact same principle. And I was, a lot of my friends, a lot of my gay friends in particular, they're always like, "Oh no, Joe Lycett, he's brilliant. He did all this stuff." I was like, no, he didn't. Actually look at what he did. Actually look. I know. I had this, I think it went on for like 3 or 4 hours over Twitter. I was going back and forwards with a friend of mine, and he was just like, "I just don't see how you see it." And I was like, "I don't see how you can't see it." We were stuck in this kind of infinite loop. Oh, and then I think we just ended up texting each other saying, like, "Should we just stop this?" But we had people commenting under so they could be tagged in the tweets or whatever, and saying like, I don't want to contribute, I just want to sit and watch.
Talking of Twitter, Zoe's compiled a nice list of questions from everyone's followers for you.
Amazing!
We thought it'd be quite an interesting thing to put you on the spot, if that's okay.
Sure.
Sure. It's a real mixed bag of questions, but.
Oh wow! Okay.
We took some of the ruder ones out.
Oh yeah, keep the rude ones out. My mother will watch this.
Yeah, they're all very PG, don't worry.
Oh, that's good.
So the first one is, how many Weetabix do you have in the morning?
Oh, okay, so I'm a huge Weetabix fan. I have it every morning. I am a two Weetabix with hot milk and sugar, and then I mush it all together and I eat it like gruel. And I basically had that since I was about 6 or 7.
Hot milk?
Growing up, hot milk.
I agree.
And it's, I tell you right now, in the middle of winter when we had that cold snap, it was the best thing to wake up.
I love
to.
Weetabix, really, but it has to be laced with sugar.
Yeah, I'm the same.
Oh yeah, I do sprinkle some sugar, and I'm not a savage. I need to find some joy in life.
I find honey's the best
option.
option.
Sugar on Weetabix might be as high as it gets.
What's your favourite place in London to get drunk?
Oh God, pretty much anywhere. No, so I'm what's known as I was once called a Westminster socialite, and I don't know how I felt about that. So the Red Lion obviously is the big pub in Westminster where all the politicos hang out, all the MPs go there.
Well, they're surprisingly small inside when you say big pub.
Very tiny. That's why everybody stands outside. Which is a thing that, since I moved to London, I never really understood why people do that. But yeah, anyway, I'm a big fan of a pub. I like a pub over a bar.
Yeah.
But yes, I live in Fulham, and there's some really nice pubs around here. So you usually find me these days. I tend to stay pretty local. I only ever really go into central London when I absolutely have to, because it's central London.
Yeah, exactly.
Clone Wars or Bad Batch?
Oh God, I knew you were going to ask me this. I'm going to say the Clone Wars. I started watching it over lockdown, because I didn't really know anything about it, and I was like, I need something to watch. I need something that had about 7 series of it, and I could just put it on in the background. But then the problem was, it went from being on in the background to me just sitting and watching it for about 4 hours a day. I got nothing done, and then I was suddenly wondering while I was still doing my work at 9 o'clock at night. I was like, oh yeah, because I've done nothing during the day. I'm really bad for that. I tend to work from home quite a lot now, and I'm one of those people, I need noise. I can't sit in silence. I get very bored in silence. But I get distracted very easily. I'm somewhat of a magpie. Anything shiny, I'm like, oh, let's go do that.
Controversially,
Anything to not do work.
controversially, I have to say I liked Bad Batch more because there were no Jedis in it.
Oh, see, my brother-in-law said the same thing.
Oh, really?
He's a big Star Wars fan, and he said the same thing. And he knows more about Star Wars than I do. So,
What's your favourite book?
oh, good question. I would probably say it's Dracula, the Bram Stoker novel. I've probably read it, God, 30, 40 times. I like how it's written. I like the story. I love the characters, and it's just one of those books that I can just pick up. And if I'm going on holiday or I'm on the train, or I'll just grab it from my desk and I can sit and read it. So it's Dracula.
Audio will do a good audiobook version of that, where I think Tim Curry's a voice in it as well, which is quite entertaining.
Oh God, I bet that's brilliant. Actually, though to be fair, ever since Rocky Horror Picture Show, I can't see Tim Curry in anything else. I know that was from the 80s, but
Yeah.
he's still Dr. Frankenfurter in my head even now. Like when you see me, things, I was like, oh, it's Dr. Frankenfurter. where's the fishnets?
The next question is, in your opinion, what actually needs to be done to fix the NHS? More money, better management, partial privatisation, or simply scrapping and starting again?
D, all of the above. I think it's this idea that we have to stop thinking that there's just one problem to it. I think we need lots of different policies, lots of different changes to it, and it might be incremental. But one thing that the public, and I think this is the public more than politicians, have to wrap their head around, things are going to take time. Like, this is a huge problem, and it's going to take 10, 15 years maybe. We can't just expect it to be fixed tomorrow. We have to get out of that mentality, and I think that's more of a public thing rather than a political thing. I think politicians play off it because the public expect immediate results. And I think we have to get out of that mentality. So yeah, when it comes to fixing things, and whether it be immigration, the NHS, cost of living, or whatever, there's no panacea. There's no instant cure for it. But I do think lots of little changes here, there, and everywhere is what we need to do.
I agree. Favourite TV show? If you say Cruising with Jane McDonald, you'll be my favourite person.
Oh God, I think I used to watch that when I was a kid. Jane McDonald, like the cruise ship program, if I remember rightly.
Oh yeah, that'd be the original one.
Yeah.
Zoe's a massive fan girl.
I am.
Oh right, okay. I have to admit, I watch a lot of TV, like a lot of TV. I just, like I said, I can just have it on, and I just find it's a way just to turn my brain off. But I would say I'm a huge Breaking Bad fan. I thought that was one of the greatest series I've watched. But I would probably say Mad Men. I remember watching Mad Men when I was at university, and it wasn't really overly popular. It never really had the cult following that Game of Thrones had or something. And I just thought it was really well acted, really well written, and I like characters where like you're not supposed to like them.
Yeah.
So do you know, like you're not supposed to like Don Draper. Don Draper is actually a terrible person, but you can end up rooting for them. So I think the prime one of that at the minute is a show called Succession. With Brian Cox in it. It's the one on HBO where it's supposed to be like this ultra mega wealthy media family, and they're just awful. They're just terrible people. They're overprivileged, toffee-nosed, like just generally bad people. And yet you end up rooting for them. And then you're like, oh God, why am I doing this? Why am I rooting for them? But I think that just shows how good the writing is and how well it's acted. But yeah, anything with like a bad main character in it usually gets my attention.
I really liked Roger from Mad Men. He was my favourite from that show.
Oh yeah, Roger. God, he had some great lines. He said, I think it was when I hit 50, I just stuck to white spirits. I always thought that was a great line.
My stomach couldn't handle it.
Yeah, I just stopped drinking whiskey and I just stuck to the white spirits. I just thought that's brilliant.
Are you a Marvel fan, Peter?
I am. But I have to admit, I'm kind of thought.
No.
Yeah, I think after kind of Civil War and Endgame, and and all that kind of stuff, I was like, I'm kind of done with it now.
Yeah.
Like none of the new stuff, or is it like Phase 4 or whatever it's called, has really captured me. I didn't mind WandaVision. I thought that was quite good. I liked the Loki TV series, and I liked the Loki series. But
President
none of
Loki.
it is. that She-Hulk thing was one of the worst
Oh
things
dear,
I've
they
ever
ruined
watched.
Daredevil, didn't
But
they?
yeah, then yeah, I will not forgive them for that.
Did you ever?
And what was?
Did you ever watch Agents of Shield? Because that has a.
I did. Yeah, I did
only
watch
just
that.
started watching it, so I've got 7 series to go through. I'm on series 5 now.
Oh yeah,
And
that was on for
well,
years. That show.
Me and my partner were thoroughly enjoying it, and although
Yeah.
I won't spoil it, one of the cast members ain't in it anymore. He turned bad, and I was really, really rooting for him, even though he was bad. Going back to the conversation, even though he was horrible, he was evil. I absolutely, that's all I could think of when you were discussing that. There was Agents of Shield. Like I was hoping that this awful person was going to just continue being that person for the whole.
It must be our Tory mentality.
Must be.
And you know, you're not the first person I know that has said that to me. He says it's because you're a Tory. You just like bad people. Mother can be cruel, but yeah. So that's one of my favourite lines that my mum hates me saying, because I've said it on the TV a couple of times. And like when somebody say, "Oh, mother can be cruel," and then she'll watch it and she texts me like, "You need to stop saying that because everyone thinks I say really mean things to you." Yeah, like trust me. After this, she'll watch this back and she'll go like, "Oh, you said it again, didn't you?"
Make sure she likes and subscribes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, she anything that I'm on, I had to remind her to watch things because she says, "Oh, I think she said to me, but you're always on." I was like, "Thanks."
To be fair, anytime I turn on GB News, you are there.
I am there. Yeah. But yeah, so like my mum always watches this stuff, and my dad does as well, and I find it really funny. When I went back up north over Christmas, I walked back into my local pub, and there was this stereotypical guy who's been drinking in that pub for about 60 years. You know, he's rotting at the bar. He's that old. And he just turned around, he looked at me, he went, "Oh, here he is, Mr. TV." And then he went back to the bar and just went back to his pint. I was like, "So I see you too, Derek."
I have visions of American Werewolf in London when they walk in and the bar just stops.
Yeah. I always say, like, the place where I grew up was basically Hot Fuzz. You know, the village in Hot Fuzz, where it's a local pub for local people kind of place. Yeah. Like, it's really nice to grow up in a place like that because, like, you get to know so many people and but sometimes, you know what? You don't want to be seen by people. You just want to nip to co-op, get some bread or milk or something and nip back home. You don't want to stop and talk to about 30 different people on the way.
Definitely.
But yeah.
Talking of shops, I just want to say, I say this a lot, but Tesco Westminster is the worst place on earth.
Oh, I avoid it like the plague. Yeah. But it's really funny. One of the best things that ever happened in Westminster was opening Greg's in the tube station. It was the greatest moment of bipartisanship, of the entire area coming together to support something and to actually be together, and like everyone's just like, "This is brilliant," and like it did actually bring people together. Greg's brought people together. But yeah, the Westminster Tesco's is awful. I think as like really busy times, it's like one in, one out.
Yeah, it's horrendous.
It's just a corridor. It's awful.
I don't think you two have been to it, have you?
I haven't, no.
I mean, run, don't. You're not missing anything.
I won't be
Don't worry about
visiting.
it. Yeah. But buy your meal deal from any other Tesco's.
I'm very shocked Scott has, because he always goes on about being a Waitrose shopper.
True.
Oh, of course he is. Of course he is.
I don't go on about it. It's the nearest shop to me.
I don't go on it. Oh, okay. So the nearest shop to me is Sainsbury's. It's one of these kind of giant Sainsbury's, and I find it really funny whenever it goes, "Oh, we shops at Sainsbury's." I was like, but it's for the same reason. It's literally round the corner. There is a Waitrose, but that's at the other end of town. I'm like, I'm not trekking all that way. And because I'm incredibly lazy. But apparently I live too close to it to get a delivery. So there was like I had when I had COVID, I thought, "Oh, I'll get like a delivery of like groceries and stuff." They wouldn't do it. I live too close. Literally, they did. Like I was like, when you fill out the form or whatever, they was like, "No, you're too close." So I was like, I had to ring my friend to go to Sainsbury's for me to get me some food because I had no food in.
Talking of groceries,
she left it on the doorstep and then scurried away.
What we like to? This is the most important question of our podcast, and we ask everyone this. Zoe, do you want to ask it?
Yeah, I'll ask it. So we always
Go on.
ask people what their top three biscuits are.
Oof.
And it's the
Can't
hardest
ask me
question.
that. That,
It is
yeah,
hard.
you know, if they ask that at Prime Minister's questions, Christ. Um,
Maybe that's
I'm a
what
bit-
they
I'm a-
need to do.
maybe that's what it is. You know, these are the issues that people care about. I'm a big fan of a custard cream.
Nice.
Love custard creams. I like a bourbon.
Yes.
Like chocolate
Oh, that's a
bourbon.
controversial thing on this show.
I know it's good. I like a chocolate hobnob.
Oh,
So you like the hot where you get like the chocolate and they've got like a layer of
that's the
chocolate.
one.
that means they're back in.
Yeah.
That means they're
Yeah,
back in the league now, doesn't
there
it,
is
Jordan?
something about them. There is something about those like chocolate hobnobs that like you have to move them away from me. Like if there's like in arm's reach, it's automatic. And then like I buy a packet of them, and the next thing you know, they've all gone, and then I hate myself because I've shamed eat. But it's a whole thing.
Have you
James
heard
Hill's
stories?
controversial. And...
Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, go on. I like this
I was
story.
just gonna
Subtly doing an eye roll, like, here we go.
Here we go, not again. Every
Have you heard
time.
someone's pronunciation of bourbon?
Go on. How do
So
you say
I
it?
would say my favourite biscuit is a bourbon biscuit.
A bourbon.
Just like that.
That's rather sweet. That's rather sweet. I actually think that's what we should call them.
Exactly.
I say,
She's getting too much
yeah.
love for this.
I
stuff.
say,
Yeah, she is.
do you know when people ask you how do you say a word, and then you suddenly forget how you say that
Yeah.
word?
Yeah.
I say a bourbon. A
So,
bourbon biscuit.
to be fair, off.
But I've heard it say, but one of my friends called it a bourbon biscuit. I was like, it's not whiskey. It's definitely not whiskey.
Definitely not.
Makes it better.
If you're, yeah, I don't know what you're playing your team, but like me, you know, I've got my limits.
James Hill had to be controversial, and he said one of his favourites was a Jaffa cake.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh,
How awkward is that?
yeah, that's awkward. I mean, even for a Tory, God, I know we've got to try to be likable, you know.
Although I got a lot of grief because my favourite is the M&S white chocolate rounds.
Oh, an M&S one.
Yeah,
oh, God.
but
there are some stereotypes, aren't there? There really are. I know. I do have to admit though that I like the milk chocolate rounds. My nan always used to get those, and like she always used to have them in the cupboard, and like whenever we used to go round, and she always like used to sneak one, and she said, "Oh, go and have another one." And I was, well, yeah, but I'm a big fan of them. They're also really good to dunk. Actually, they are quite a dunkable biscuit. But yeah.
They don't absorb much, though, do they?
No, they don't. But I like how they melt the chocolate just a little bit, and then it's nice. Again, I don't get out much, but yeah.
These are the important political
Exactly.
subjects at the end of the day, aren't they? You don't get this on GB News.
No, you don't. No, you don't get any biscuits.
That's
But
criminal.
I tell you one thing that GB News do have, and everybody I know that's ever been on the show has always said, any of the shows has always said, the coffee machine is one of the best coffee machines in the industry. It wipes the floor with the one at Talk TV. The one at LBC is absolutely terrible. But the coffee machine at GB News, it's the one apparently it's the same one that they have at the First Class Lounge at Terminal 5, apparently. So I was
Did they steal it?
informed. Yeah, well, it would surprise me. Anything not nailed down. But no, and I was, like I said, I was there the other day, and the coffee machine wasn't working, and I was like, oh, that's really ruined my day. Actually, I was rather looking forward to a nice coffee.
Is that the only reason I come here?
Yeah, literally at one point it was.
Well, thank you for coming on today, Peter. It's been great fun, I have to admit.
This has been a lot of fun, and thank you so much for having me. Thank you very much.
Massive thank you for listening to the Political Chinwag. If you haven't already, please subscribe, please like, and please follow on whatever platform you're listening to us on. Peter Bongs was such a good laugh. Great person. Go check him out on social media. Thank you very much. Bye.